So we've got a big Epstein update today. There's been quite a few developments that happened yesterday. The major one being that the FBI has apparently raided, along with the NYPD, I think, Epstein's Little St. James Island, also known as Orgy Island and Pedo Island. This island, of course, was at the center of all the Epstein stories going back for years, at least as long as I've been somewhat following the Epstein case, long before he was ever arrested or whether there was ever a dream of him being arrested. You know, I had heard about the infamous Orgy Island where he kept his private entourage of sex slaves. And of course, this is also where he brought all of his famous friends so that he could not lease them out, but sort of lend out his women, his children. And I have to say, I'm not too optimistic about this raid. It's coming way too late. Frankly, if they wanted to raid this island, they should have done it the same day that they raided his Manhattan mansion, and the same day that they arrested Epstein. All of his properties should have been raided at the same time, and frankly, not just his U.S. properties, his international properties should have also been raided. The FBI and the NYPD, or whoever, should have coordinated with international authorities in every country, and perhaps local authorities in all the states where he owned property, like Palm Beach, the Virgin Islands, New Mexico, and New York, so that all these places could have been swept at the same time, and so they could have gathered as much evidence. But you know that in the weeks since Epstein's been arrested, he's had his associates cleansing all of his properties, trying to destroy as much evidence as they could, so that it couldn't be used against him. The fact that it took this long to raid even Orgy Island, let alone the rest of his properties, shows to me that Epstein is still getting some sort of favorable treatment from the justice system. And so now that he's dead and that the island has likely been cleansed to a great extent, I'm skeptical of how much we're going to be able to find out about what actually went on there. Now, the next big update comes from, I believe, originally the New York Times, and they're reporting that not only was Epstein left alone for hours at a time during his stay at the time when he actually supposedly hung himself in his cell, but it turns out that there was a grand total of 2 guards on the floor of the prison in which Epstein resided at the time of his death. And in fact, one of those guards was not even an actual prison guard. Apparently, the prison says or jail, I guess it's a jail, says they are short-staffed and that they do not have enough guards to actually guard the whole prison. So what they do is they take people, like from the offices who do like clerical work and stuff, and they take them when they don't have a heavy workload, and they say, hey, come be a prison guard for us for a couple hours. And that's supposed to fill in the gaps in their coverage. However, even with that extra help, this non-prison guard let Epstein by himself for quite a long time. And we have no idea what could have been going on in Epstein's cell during that time. Perhaps someone could have snuck in and done away with him, or he could have just had enough time to try and really take whatever it was that he had in his cell and choke himself with it. But as I said in my last video, no matter how Epstein died, whether he was killed or by someone else or killed by himself, he definitely did so with sort of a wink and a nod from this guard, because if you are a prison guard and or frankly, if you're the prison management and you're housing the most important and most high-profile alleged criminal of the century, you're not going to leave him unguarded. You're going to divert whatever resources you have, no matter how scarce, to protecting this guy, because he is a very high-risk and important prisoner. Epstein held the keys to really unlocking the secrets of our pedophile elite. And had he lived, he could have told us all quite a bit more about the folks who rule us. So in order for Epstein to be left alone for hours, and for him to not even be guarded by a real prison guard, I can only suppose that would be as a result of a conscious negligence, not merely incompetence. Now, the good news about all this is that nobody's surprised, other than the most establishment of the media folks. You really don't have anyone who is buying into the official story of the Epstein death so far. And of course, there was a time in which journalists were the last people to buy into official government narratives. That's what journalism used to be about. They were the fourth estate. They were supposed to keep the government honest. They were supposed to question everything and investigate and try and prove that what the government said was in fact correct or incorrect. But instead, these days, the journalist's job is to write down whatever the government tells them, and they say, "Oh, thank you, sir. May I please now kiss your boots?" It is quite insane to me that the very same journalists who believe absolutely nothing that comes out of the mouth of Donald Trump, and in fact, without even doing their research, will assume that everything he says is in fact false, even when he tells the truth, that they would believe literally every word out of the mouth of all the bureaucrats who work under Trump. So they do not believe Trump at all, but they believe every word of his employees. It's a very strange standard. I guess it comes from a love of government in the abstract, but a hatred for the specific elected government as it exists today. There seems to be this understanding that unelected bureaucrats are somehow pure and mystical beings that can do no wrong. But thankfully, that is a sickness which only seems to infect the media. Most Americans, left and right, are not buying into this Epstein narrative, and frankly, I think that's why they will not be able to cover this up. If you take other, very high-profile conspiracy theories like around JFK or 9/11, people, everyone bought the initial narrative initially. And it was only over time that people started to question various things about the official government story surrounding the JFK assassination and 9/11 and whatever you think of those things. You didn't have a mass movement of people on day one who said this is absolutely wrong. That took a long time to develop, and it took a lot of people sort of going down rabbit holes. And that's not something that has had to happen here. Here, immediately, just on its surface, the Epstein killing or the Epstein death looks to be some kind of an inside job. So it gives me hope that people are able to see that. Now, in response to all this stuff around Epstein, the French authorities apparently are becoming concerned that the Americans cannot handle this investigation, that they will not be able to get to the bottom of what actually happened throughout Epstein's life and all of his crimes and all of his co-conspirators and all of his buddies who partook in his pedophile parties. So they are opening their own investigation, and considering that Epstein was active in France, that is perfectly reasonable. And so hopefully their investigation will be a little less corrupt than the American investigation appears to be on its surface. So perhaps then there's a check, even if there is some kind of an attempted cover-up, even more than there already has been in the American investigation. The French investigation may be a little more honest. So with that said, if you gained anything of value to this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.